Good afternoon, and of course, good morning to you, our guest. And I'm totally honored to welcome our guest is Javier De Frutos, who is in the United States at the moment and kindly found some time to join the Ballet Icons platform to answer some of my questions. Welcome, Javier, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
What a pleasure. We started our series during very challenging times. You're the first choreographer we are taking an interview. Until now, we had the pleasure of interviewing so many wonderful dancers from so many countries in the world. And now we're welcoming you, our first choreographer we're interviewing. Really, what an honor, what a pleasure.
Thank you.
I will start from the beginning. When you realized that dance and choreography is going to be your life, your career?
I think there's something interesting about these kind of professions, because these kind of professions are very attached to obsessions. And I think that career chooses you and you don't choose it. It's very different. You know that you're going to go against obstacles of non-traditional way for your family to see what your future is going to be, especially as a male dancer and a male choreographer. I think I knew it. I think I was waiting for a sign. I grew up in Latin America, so the opportunities were slightly different. And at that time, late 70s, early 80s, there were only 3 or 4 places that if you were really serious about your craft, those were the places you were going to be. And in the Western world, that was New York, London, and Paris were the 3 places where the arts kind of converged. And I just remember that I knew that it was going to be stage. And I didn't know exactly how it was going to manifest. I also knew that I had facilities within my body that I felt that it would be kind of going against nature if I didn't take advantage of learning my craft through my body, because I had a very limited amount of time. I started at age 17 training, which is relatively late. But I was already studying arts, and I already had a background in early semesters of architecture, which was my first time that I went to university. And my head was ready and my body needed to catch up. And I felt that out of all the art disciplines, dance was going to be the one that required for me to take an action immediately. Everything else could wait, but this one was going to happen. My body was not going to get any younger. But I also knew that eventually dancing was going to be kind of like going to the army. I knew that I had to go through it to be a good general. Oh my God, I'm going to get into that analogy. But to be a good head of my battalion, I was going to have to go through all the stages. I wanted to be a good director. I wanted to be a good choreographer, and I wanted to be somebody who a performer wouldn't be able to say, I cannot do that, because I could always prove, actually, you can, because I did. I didn't want to sit comfortably on the chair. I wanted to be rolling up my sleeves and doing stuff. So I think I always go back and saying, I don't know exactly when the moment was. I just knew that it chose me. And I always knew that it was a word that I find very gratifying, which is inevitable. It was inevitable for me to do this.
You see, and wonderful. It's so exciting to learn about this. When you were studying in this contemporary dance school, and obviously you were trained as a dancer and you were studying choreography at the same time?
Yeah. Well, yes and no. It's interesting because in the States, I left London Contemporary Dance School. I left London and I went to New York. That was the next part of my pilgrimage. And I trained, and I went to the Merce Cunningham School, and I knew that I was finding something very exciting, which at that time in New York, there was no place like it, the converging of arts and choreographers. And it was the first time the contemporary choreographers were fusing with ballet companies. All that was kind of happening, not in Europe, but it was really happening in New York at that time. I would never change that time for the world. And I was taking what it was probably best described as composition. I felt that it was better to call it composition than choreography, because nobody can really teach you choreography. You need to have the craft, and
Yes.
then how you apply that craft. Like a painter, you learn composition, you learn harmony, you learn all those kind of things. I felt that composition was something that I felt more comfortable and less derivative than going to a choreography class. So I always tried to make that difference. And I also knew that choreography was going to be something that started in the States, in my time in New York. And it felt, there was two things that led me to be a choreographer. Number one was that I was working with a company called Laura Dean Dancers and Musicians. This was the height of minimalism in the US. Lucinda Childs and Laura were the major exponents. I was in the company, a company that I felt that it was important for me to be. I was a very dutiful, as in duty, dancer. I was a good interpreter of her work. I was very respectful of all of it. And then one day I found that I started to have doubts on whether I got to a point in which I needed to say things of my own and not being the conduit of somebody else. And I felt it also as respect to her, that I felt I no longer feel that I'm serving you. And that I need to serve something more vital.
Absolutely.
And you need, and I needed to be the rebellion person that broke that mold. And something very fateful happened. In that time in New York, it was the height of the AIDS epidemic. And we were losing great choreographers and performers on a daily basis. And we were going and attending memorials, and memorials were to celebrate our colleagues and our peers. And so we all always volunteered to dance in the churches, to dance in whatever they were going to memorial. And I did my very first work, which was a short thing for a dancer called Damien Aquabella, who was somebody that I met, who was a very esteemed member of Bill T. Jones' company, and that was the people that I used to hang out with, and I decided for some reason that I was going to do a tiny piece for him called D for Damien, which was only about 3 minutes long, and somehow I felt, from that moment onwards, I felt that I was starting to collect very personal things, and that I felt that the medium that I knew the best on how to express them and craft them was choreography, and that's how it all started.
Beautiful. What is your main motivation when you start your creative process for each piece?
Wow.
I know it's a difficult question.
Yeah, each one is very.
What is driving you? How does it happen?
It's kind of scary, because it does depend on things that maybe subconsciously are in your mind. I love literature, and I probably, if I could have chosen a profession, I would have loved being a writer. I just happen not to be very good at it and good at this. But it never, my admiration for writers has been always greater than for choreographers. Literature has always kind of inspired me. But also personal things. I felt always more comfortable on stage displaying my history than to people or to friends. I'm an introvert in real life, and I'm an extrovert on stage. So that has allowed me to kind of pour a lot of self awareness and issues that felt that at the end I knew that they were going to be universal, and people connected to them. So I felt that that was my duty. So it's really hard. It's really hard to tell. So, and if you ask me today, you know, I would like to ask that question to every choreographer. What are you thinking of doing
They
next?
probably, they probably wouldn't have an answer. Sorry
No.
to challenge you, but your comments were most beautiful. Thank you very much for sharing. Do you sometimes can see the final picture and result of what the piece is going to be right at the beginning when you start? Did it happen to you maybe a few times?
As I have a general vision which has to do less with the look, and it has to do more with a sense of DNA, more or less, you know, the vocabulary, getting to know how these people move. I always felt that my work had to have a human element to it. I always felt that if I attached myself too much to a plastic vision, I was going to end up being disappointed, because my head was always going to be better than the reality. And I felt, but there is something about that. If I feel that I walk into a studio and I have created the right atmosphere, then somehow the general vision of how I envision the final product is going to be there. I said the other day to somebody that I have never been great at plan A, but I've been really masterful at plan B. I've always taken advantage of when my plan A falls through, that my plan B ends up being the blessing in disguise.
These days, it's a very valuable talent to have plan B. This is what we are going through now, of course.
Yeah.
What do you find the most challenging, the most difficult in the creative process? I'm sure there are many things, and depending on what piece you're doing, what work you're doing, but maybe
primarily not knowing how to balance the obsessiveness of the creative process and my day-to-day routine. That you never, I might have to be able to understand that the dancers have a discipline in which we start at 10 and we finish at 6, but my job probably ends up at 3 a.m. and somehow I wake up at 5 going, I just wish that I could run to the studio and do this right now before it leaves my head. That I find challenging. I find challenging, and I find challenging letting it go after. That the creating families and then letting them go very quickly is heartbreaking every time.
I was also going to ask you now whether you have certain structures and rules and principles when you work with different artists and different companies. And of course, the list of people, of dancers, of companies you worked with is very, very impressive. Pet Shop Boys, Ballet, Boys, Royal New Zealand Company, Scottish Ballet, Rambert. Are you applying certain principles, or again they're changing depending on the company and the artist you work with?
Depending, and I probably a mixture of all of them, depending on the artist. Casting has been my primary concern from the beginning of my career. I know that I'm going to spend a great deal amount of time with a group of people. I want to make sure that I want to spend time with those people, and I want to make sure that my casting is going to reflect our time in the studio, that it's going to be the result of what happens in the studio. You have to do it right. Chemistry cannot be measured, but I think you get better at figuring it out the more you work with people. I know that people get the best out of me when I like them. And so I really do. I'm not detached as an artist. I can't be detached as an artist, and that sometimes is great and sometimes is not. So there are cultural differences, but for me, for instance, going to New Zealand and being able to find a satellite, a group of dancers that understood what I was doing was a really glorious surprise to me. And then finding the same lovely group of people and mix them up with my own dancers at the Royal Ballet, just absolutely divine. One of the things that I found probably the most satisfying in the last few years was putting on stage Jonathan Goddard and Edward Watson side to side. I felt that was a match that nobody had thought about before, and I felt, God, I'm so glad that I wasn't wrong, because he has certainly proven to be a la par to any dancer at the Royal, but in his own complete creation as an artist. So those kind of pairings and mixtures and cooking and flavors and cocktailing, this casting has always been how I start work, and the fact that sometimes my final vision has been entirely altered by the presence of greatness in the studio that makes me think that there is another way around. Remember that I'm also getting older, and my dancers are always the same age, technically.
You do not want to remember that at all. You bring so much energy and creative talent.
But it is important because I'm in a room with an energy in which I was an integral part of physically, and now I need to see it from a different point of view and enjoy it and let it grow. So I would never be the older choreographer that says, "Oh, in my times you did this."
No, you will not.
Well, and my times mean absolutely nothing today, 2020, with what we're going through. This is all about the future and not about the past.
Beautiful answer. Thank you so much. What I'm enjoying our discussion so much, and what I find very, very interesting is that in answering one question, you are already disclosing information and some answers to my following question, and I love it. I love it, and I was actually going to ask you. You worked with so many really outstanding companies in different parts of the world. I've already named some of them just now. And I was going to ask, could you mention some particular memorable moments in certain collaborations, maybe just some? And you already, of course, mentioned Edward Watson and Jonathan Goddard, which was beautiful. Any other memories you would like to share?
Dancers always bring that joy, but not only that. I think the surprise of being asked to collaborate with Pet Shop Boys on The Most Incredible Thing took me by surprise. I didn't know that I was on their radar. And of course that work is now celebrating its 10th year. And so that for me was a surprise. For me to be in the same room with that level of fame and artistry, kind of was something that I needed to adjust myself, and the idea of creating collaborations in which I still had to crack the whip, but I had to be a good and democratic collaborator was something that surprised me. So certainly the collaboration with Pet Shop Boys, I know that they treasure it as much as I do. So I know that that's how we worked. Collaboration with visual artists and collaboration with designers. I never.
You proved again, because I was going to ask about this in my next question, and you see, you're moving. What qualities of your character and your creative mind allow you to be so multifaceted? Because not many, even very, very established and very creative choreographers, done as much as you in so many different fields. And you've been working with the dancers, with ballet dancers and contemporary dance artists. You've been involved in video production and musicals and theater. So how you actually manage to be so multifaceted, and what do you think is it in you which allows you to go in so many different directions?
I'm gonna do full disclosure. The first one, which is probably more vulnerable, is that I didn't want to be out of a conversation. I felt that it was very important for me that if I was going to be in a room talking to a designer, I was going to have to be in a room talking to a designer and being able to be seeing each other eye to eye. So I did, and I had some background in design. So I I didn't want to take the job, but I wanted to be able to direct the job. Same thing with lighting designers, same thing with visual artists, same thing with composers. I just didn't want to be out of the conversation. That's the number one. So I want every time that I work with somebody, I wanted to understand what they did so I could push them for more. I didn't want anybody to say, no, what you're asking me cannot be done. I wanted more to say, what I'm asking, can I help you to achieve it, to take you to a different place? And if we did, then it would be a landmark for us. And then there is probably something more that has to do with a colonial attitude. I'm Spanish, but I was born in Venezuela, and I grew up and I did a lot of my training in Venezuela. Venezuela, not the Venezuela that we know now, the Venezuela that was then, with a lot of influences and money and a lot of stuff. But we always had, as colonial people do, we always had an inferiority complex. We always overcompensated. And tried to learn everything to be able to be in the conversation like a sponge, but always with a level of humbleness and humility. And I think that never left me, that wanting to be part of the conversation was something that I strive for, and therefore I always overstudied and I over-researched. It was just the insecurity rather than anything else.
Thank you very, very much. You've been awarded on so many occasions, and you've been awarded so many prestigious prizes. I will not even start naming them all, but really, really so many, including Laurence Olivier prizes, and you've been nominated in all the dance categories, which was very, very exceptional for a choreographer. What does this kind of recognition, what does it mean to you? Does it bring more responsibility for you and brings new challenges? How is it?
Well, the number one is that I love it. I really do enjoy, and I enjoy the night out, and I enjoy feeling that I have been recognized. I enjoy the possibility that opens some doors. I mean, you kind of said it before. I mean, when I was a performer, I was probably a more recognizable figure. I now work behind the scenes, so I don't get dressed fancy very often, and I don't go to many of these parties very often. So I enjoy the pageantry, and I enjoy
and you look absolutely fantastic.
Thank you. I tried. So they are really sometimes, and I never take any of them for granted. I probably because it does open doors, it does present you, it does help open a conversation about future productions. People want to have certain labels attached, and I realize what commerce is doing to our business, and you have to accept it and say, yeah. It's easier for me to walk into a room and be introduced as the Olivier Award-winning choreographer. It just opens a conversation. It just gives some kind of guarantee. Not guarantee from me, but it makes people more at ease of the team if they haven't heard my name, but they certainly haven't heard they have heard the name of the award. That saying that, I think that, and I can't remember which one. It may have been the first time that I got nominated for an Olivier. That I felt relieved, and I felt very happy, and I felt incredibly honored and surprised, and also kind of part of the list of things that I sort of felt like, wow, when I reached that place, then I meant that I would have arrived. And then you arrive and you realize, I arrived at nothing. I arrived at a piece of paper that says that I got nominated for something, and I'm exactly the same person that I was yesterday. And now it's slightly more nervous because this may be just a fluke. So until I receive another nomination or I get another award, I'm not going to entirely believe.
You've answered that. This is your approach. This is how you see it. Yes. Yeah. Well, very humble, and thank you for answering. It's extremely exciting, our conversation, and we're coming to an end. But I need to ask you two more final questions, which are related to the time we are going through now. What would be your advice and your message of hope to many of your colleagues, dancers, choreographers, people in the performing arts all around the world, when at times we do lose hope and we don't know when this uncertainty is going to end?
Yeah, and I think probably relating it to the awards thing is like, you know, when you reach it at this place, you kind of want to know that you're going to be able to survive this thing and continue working, which is like, you know, when you receive an award, you just want to receive another award to make sure that it wasn't a fluke. And this is, you kind of want to survive this and be able to learn something out of this. This is my main concern. I have to probably say that this has been very challenging for me on my personal life. Everything that could possibly go wrong during this time has actually gone wrong, and because you know, we were about to do some research and some development for a new work, and of course this brought it to a halt, and non-able, you know, so financially everything kind of went to a ground. The first thing, but also the first thing that happened was that this wasn't just happening to me. This was happening to everybody. So once you realize this is not my bad luck, this is 300 billion people bad luck. We're all affected by this, and we have to understand it. I wanted to be, at the beginning, I did what everybody did, which was to, well, I'm going to use the time to do some baking. And then 25/7 loaves of bread later, I realized that's not what I do. I'm happy that I learned how to bake some bread, but that's not what I do. I have a job. I have a job to do, and my job is important. And I also started getting angry at not getting guidance from the government and our leaders. And then I went back and say that again, Olga.
So many people share your feelings that we get frustrated and angry at no action. And
so this was the first thing that I said, okay, I need to accept that I am angry, and I'm going to have to embrace this anger, and I'm going to have to be the angry person, and it's fine. And then eventually I will come out of that and I'll do something else. We are here. What I feel is the number one, we need to get to the end of this. There is no way that whatever powers have made us to be on a lockdown for 6 months for us not to learn any lessons. It would be ridiculous. We're not going back to the same world, at least not in my lifetime. We're gonna learn the repercussions of this. So the one thing that I started thinking about was that I was always looking, you know, going on to Facebook, checking on the social media for some answers. Is there anybody that is kind of thinking? Certainly the government and all the collective governments are not knowing what to do. And why would they? They don't know. We don't know. They don't know. It could have been prevented in a different way, but it hasn't. So people are talking about, and I've probably been very topical, incredible that the British government has provided 1.5 billion pounds, but no plan. So I'm happy to get the check. Well, I'm not going to see a penny, but there are no plans. And then I realized that in my lifetime, people that have said about me, never myself, have said about me that I'm a pioneer, that I'm a maverick, that I'm a leader in the industry. And then I realized, well, I didn't believe it then, but I may have to start believing it now, because I'm going to have to get off my back and start creating whatever the next, if nobody has a plan, then
please
I need to have
be
a
a
plan.
pioneer, and we would be very happy to hear your ideas and to cooperate. This is very important. We need such amazingly creative and talented people like you, whose talent been already recognized right now, to start acting and finding solutions in this.
Yeah, and finding a way to realize. Somebody said the other day, and I think this is a very important thing when we're talking about creatives and not being self-centered. That we're in all of this together. I get that. And then talking to, you know, hearing a director saying, we're gonna save the arts. We're gonna be on this together. And you know, even if what we have to do is to get a couple of actors on stage with a director and no sets and no costumes. And I say, wait a minute. that's the Titanic. You're just saving yourself in a couple of rafters, but I need the, you know, if I don't dress my performers, I'm not giving a job to the designer, to the makers, to the people that iron it, to the people that open the theater. Our industry employs thousands of people. It's not just a whim.
Yeah.
So the responsibility to my industry, if my job has looked beautiful and has looked important and present because of the works of designers like Bruno Poet or Katrina Lindsay or you know, the Tony Award winning team that has been part of a lot of my stuff, I owe it to them. If I bring up a job on stage, they are the people that will get employed, and we just need to do this together. And we need to do it as the rebels that we used to be. Plan B, and probably going back to the ballet world, is that I want for the Royal Ballet. I'm just naming a company, but I want for the Royal Ballet to come back. But there is not a version of Swan Lake that informs with social distance. There is not a social distance.
No half measures. No half measures.
So until they can do it, somebody else needs to continue bringing this up. And I think there is going to be an incredible resurgence for the independent sector, because we're going to have to come up with something to fill up while we can get those people safely on stage. A different kind of responsibility of artists. Plan B. Plan B is going to be Plan A.
Let's work together on this, and thank you very much for sharing. And my last question to you would be, very briefly, did your human values change during this time?
Did my...
Do you value more? What do you value the most in people now? And did it change during this difficult time from what you were thinking before? What you value in people, in human?
Do you mean like the context of my work, or how I'm thinking of things?
No, it's not about the work. It's just about how you value people and friendship.
Yeah, of course.
On a human level.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, this has brought the best and the worst in people. It has made people very. I discover things on friendships that I didn't think that it was there. Some people didn't have the patience. Some people were surprised. Some people were skeptical. I've always been much more pragmatic and realistic, and that has made me revalue. I have never spent so much forced time alone, rethinking of who would I like to see when I get out of here. And probably the one thing that I had, has made me see people in a very different way. And as I said before, I hope that we all come out of this having learned something. We need to have change. And I don't want to get kumbaya or all of this stuff. The first thing that I want to do, I'm loving that we're doing this in Zoom. And I'm loving that the technology has allowed us to be able to see each other face to face. As soon as this is over, I want to throw my phone away. I don't want to ever see anybody on a screen ever again. We're going to meet face to face. Anybody that wants to see me, they has to come and meet me. Beautiful. I think this is going to change the way that we communicate, because we're so starving of that human touch, and this has seemed the closest thing. And thank God, can you imagine not having this during these times?
Absolutely. Javier, thank you so much from all my heart for being today, for sharing your soul, your art, your wisdom with us. And let's be strong, and let's be positive, and let's find and plan ways of making Plan B to work.
Absolutely.
It was frozen for a second. I said, let's work on Plan B and making it work, because we all need it. Javier De Frutos was our guest. Thank you so much, and we can't wait to see you properly, to hug you, to work with you. And thank you again for being with us today. Lots of love, Javier.
Thank you, honey, and I will speak to you very soon.
Very soon.
Be safe.
You too. You too. Bye bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.